Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast. I am 𝘁Ᾰ𝗄𝘆𝗀 and my mission is to inspire you to grow, stand out, and take action towards the next level of your life. I interview leaders, authors, successful entrepreneurs, spiritual teachers, exceptional people who will inspire you to improve your life. Tune in for 2 episodes each week and make sure you subscribe to get them as soon as they are released. In today's show, I am delighted and privileged to speak with Bob Doyle. Bob, you are best known for your contribution in the film and book 𝘁฻𝗸𝗀𝗄𝘆 as a featured law of attraction expert and coach. You have been teaching these principles for over 2 decades now, and your work is focused on helping people decide who they want to be and how they want to express themselves. You are an author, a serial entrepreneur with diverse background, and a prolific video content creator through the Bob Doyle Show. Recently, your attention and coaching has shifted from the metaphysical aspects of the law of attraction to a more grounded look at that thing that controls our experience, our brain, and specifically our ability to rewire our brain so we can literally become the person who creates the results we want in our life. Bob, it's a real pleasure to have you with me today.
Thanks, I'm honored to be here.
There are many things I want to discuss, but I would like to start with some elements of your story, of your journey. And as I was telling you just before we started recording, many people probably know you from 𝘁𝗻𝗸𝗀𝗄𝘆, but there is some very intriguing facets of your story that have not necessarily something to do with 𝘁𝗻𝗸𝗀. So while I was looking around, I found 3 points, so I would like to make 3 brief stops in your history just to set the tone for the conversation. And
Sure.
The first one is back in 2002 when you quit the corporate job that you had, which you say that you hated it. It was giving you good income, but your spirit was dying. That was the phrase you used. And you quit, and that led to uncomfortable financial situations. So can you take us back there? And specifically, I would like to ask 2 things about that time. One is, what tipped the scale towards you quitting, even though you didn't have a financial plan, from what I understand? And second, what was the biggest lesson you learned from that transition?
Okay. Well, the tipping point, boy, it was a slow. It takes me forever to learn a lesson, man. And I was in that job for way too, I was there for 4 years. 3 of them, I didn't need to be there. Right. Because when I first joined the company, I thought it was going to be a more creative endeavor. And then they shifted their whole focus into a completely different area. And then I was being asked to do things that I never signed up for. And so, you go in every day and it just sucks your soul, because that's a lot of time, 8-9 hours out of your life committed to something that you do not enjoy. And especially if you are like me, who I started my career I wanted to be in broadcasting. So I was all about creative self-expression and doing voices and being funny and, that kind of thing. That's what I wanted to do. And then I did that for a few years, 7 years in radio. But then when I got to the point where I was in a bigger market and I couldn't do what I wanted to do, I had to spend many years in the industry to earn my way to that. Mm-hmm. I just kind of bailed and said, well, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. So my point there is that I've just been searching for something to express myself creatively. And that job was the opposite of that. There was no ability for me to express myself creatively. And it was really impacting just the quality of my life. Certainly there was some depression and just feelings of sort of hopelessness and feeling trapped in the job. But I think what happened was they started doing a bunch of layoffs, and I was like, okay, lay me off. Let's get some severance. And they told me, no, we just see something in you. We don't want to let you go. And I was like, all right, whatever. So I had like a vacation coming. I went on vacation, and during that time, I just sort of did some soul searching and said, I'm out of here. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And but the tipping point was I just can't go in another day. I will find something. I had developed an interest in this conversation sort of, reality creation. I'd always had sort of a fascination with it way, way back in the background. And I felt like there was something for me there. Mm-hmm. And I just decided at that point, well, I'm just going to get this. I'm going to learn this and I'm going to teach it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a speaker. For a short time, that was like my goal, was just to be a speaker. So anyway, that was the tipping point, just absolute misery. And I just felt like I'd rather go through the suffering than just keep showing up here every day, because I just wasn't ever going to, I could justify keeping the job a million different ways. Leaving was on the outside very irresponsible looking, but it was the best thing I ever did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the lessons.
Yes.
The most valuable lesson. Well, it's interesting because it would be easy for me to go like, well, I learned I should have moved on sooner, or but everything's perfect. Exactly how it happened is how it needed to happen, for the story to be the story and for it to impact every part, of my development. I mean, if I had quit a year earlier, The Secret may have never happened for me. It's just like, you just have to trust and go, okay, well, that was just a part of my journey. And so I think in retrospect, one of the biggest lessons I've learned in general is that, looking through the lens of what if this is for me? What if what is happening is for me and not to me or whatever? Like everything, even though we can't understand why, it's for you. It's in your best interest. So I think that's just a general lesson I've learned from everything. And it's something I have to keep reminding myself when stuff comes up and you go, what is this about?
Thank you. And indeed, at that time, when it happens, it doesn't seem to be a lesson. But in retrospect, as you said, you see how an event grows us or allows us to expand. Shall we go to the second brief stop then in your journey, which is 2006 and the release of The Secret? And just one brief question, really. How did The Secret impact your life?
Mostly I guess a lot of ways, because I'd been teaching the law of attraction already for 3 years when The Secret came out. And it was a much different landscape out there in the personal development world. Not, in comparison, not that many people were familiar with the law of attraction. It was kind of the reason the film was made, was to introduce people. So my life changed, though, in two ways, but mostly sort of professionally. I did everything I did to get to the point where I was invited to be on The Secret my way, my voice, my everything, my ideas, just Bob being Bob. And after The Secret came out, I felt like this was a huge lesson for me. I felt like there was a different set of expectations on me now. Like I had to be like Jack Canfield and Bob Proctor and all those guys who'd been in the industry for like 30 years. I've been at 3, right? So I felt like I had to sort of compromise like the silly aspect of me, or just that part that's a little left of center, because now there was this worldwide expectation that I was this Bob Doyle from The Secret. That label followed me around, well, to this day. But I mean, Bob Doyle from The Secret. It's like, well, what about Bob Doyle, the voiceover guy? What about Bob Doyle, the ukulele player? What about Bob Doyle, the broadcaster? What about Bob, all of the voiceover guy? And it was just like, after a while, I felt like a little resentful that I couldn't just be me, and I felt wedged into now, by the way, this was all in my head. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think I had one comment from one person that made me go down that road, but the rest of it was just all my stuff. But then once live streaming in any form, first with Periscope and then, several other platforms, Facebook and so on, once live streaming came, that changed everything for me, because I was then able to, that broadcaster in me was able to come back and do things in creative ways and communicate in real time with people. I think I had been, I'd been throwing information one way out for years. Like even The Secret was a one-way conversation, but doing live streams and there's a person right there who you can talk to, that really allowed me to find, who am I in this conversation and who do I want to be with people and all of that. So The Secret really forced me to really get clear about who I wanted to be out in the world. And it, just like quitting my job, like I feel like I waited a really long time to break out of that Bob Doyle from The Secret thing. But once I did, I kind of did it with a vengeance. And now I'm just out there all over the place doing whatever I want to do, while my attempt, of course, is to keep this conversation, the personal development, let me really help you with your life conversation, at least segmented enough so that people understand that, no, I really can help you, even though I also do all these other crazy things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and they are part of you, and that creative expression of you is part of who you are. So thank you for that, sharing that realization. And it's not something that I would have thought the way you said it. Let me then move a bit more forward to this time and really go into what we're about to talk today. And that was that shift recently away from the law of attraction to neuroplasticity, brain rewiring. So what was there any trigger for that? Was there any...
There kind of was a trigger, yes. And oddly enough, it was rereading The Science of Getting Rich, the Wallace D. Wattles book from 100 years ago. Now, they don't talk about brain rewiring or neuroplasticity, but they very clearly talk about the importance of being the person you need to be so that you can attract these things. Again, they weren't using the same words that we've sort of used in there. But in terms of creating our experience, it was very clear that we needed to be, right? We needed to be that person who was consistent with getting these results. Now, after having coached and taught and spoken and all of those things on the law of attraction, my frustration with it is that, and part of this, I think, might be a little bit due to The Secret, but there was this whole magical thinking thing that happened. Like people just figured, and there was a genie in the movie, so that didn't help. But the idea that all we have to do is just think this, or just put this on a vision board or whatever. And they got so caught up with all these techniques because once The Secret came out, now everybody was all of a sudden a law of attraction expert. Everybody in personal development and internet marketing was putting out products about how to make the law of attraction work. So right there, you've already broken what's true. You don't make it work, it's working. So from the beginning, people's mindset on what the law of attraction is was just wrong. And so they had all kinds of expectations on it. And so my career became about trying to explain the ins and outs of the law of attraction and answering ridiculous questions that have nothing to do with a person's personal transformation. So when I realized a couple of years ago about this being, how important it is to be, there was just a sequence of thoughts in my mind that was like, well, what determines that? What determines who we're being? Well, when it comes down to it, it's the wiring of our brain. Our wiring, the question or the statement I'm putting out there for people, or the question is, when is reality really created? Mm-hmm. And when a law of attraction person might say, well, when I put it on my vision board or when I first conceptualize it, and I'm saying reality is created in the moment that you give that moment meaning. Like this, your reality is what you decide it is in that moment. Is it good? Is it bad? Are you feeling abundant? Are you feeling lack? Are you feeling loved? All of it. That's your experience of reality. And every bit of that is determined by the meaning that you're giving the moment. And what determines the meaning is your wiring, how you've been literally programmed over the course of time. And so when I realized, this is the direct way. Our brains change. Our brains can change. They change all the time. That's all you really need to know. You don't need to know vibration and energy and resonance and any of it. All you need to know is, okay, my brain can change. What changes it? Well, it's consistent information on an ongoing basis that's different than what you had before. This is how we learn anything. Learn a new language, learn to walk, all of which, by the way, came with discomfort, mistakes, feedback, right? That we had to adjust to get where we're going to go. But somehow when it comes to personal development, people are expecting, and it's because of the way that it's marketed out there. Well, if it doesn't happen in 7 to 14 days, this is obviously a scam, right? Or, oh, this is uncomfortable, so I guess the universe doesn't want it for me. These are the types of thinking that I want no part of anymore because it just slows people down. They're so hung up on, but what about this situation? I didn't attract, it's like, okay. Do you want to transform? Yes. How? That's what we need to understand. Who do you need to be? Just like you said in the introduction, who do you need to be to attract or get or receive the results that you want in your life? When we determine who you're being now and how it's different from who you need to be to attract those things, then we can start to actually do the reprogramming of the brain. But it's a commitment.
Wow, you opened up now quite a few topics simultaneously. So one thing that with what you said, it was about the law of attraction being used as a tool in personal development, and I think that's quite frequently the way it's presented. As you said, it was marketed like this, and this is a big misunderstanding. Do you want to expand a little bit more on that, like the tool of
Yes.
law of attraction versus what it actually is?
So the way I explain it is like, and people have used gravity before because they talk about, well, law of attraction is just a law, like the law of gravity. And I understand that approach, but what I'm saying is the law of attraction just is, right? We don't turn it on. It describes how energy behaves in the universe, but we don't have to understand all of that. Just like we don't need to understand gravity to make a glass fall onto the ground when we let go of it. We just let go and gravity handles it. So we do the only thing we need to do to make the glass hit the ground is let go of it, and then it hits the ground. So law of attraction is the same thing. We don't need to know and get into the physics and try to interact with the outside world and make the universe do our thing. If we change who we're being, right? We just take on different behaviors based on what we have envisioned for ourselves so that we can get these results. When we do that on a consistent basis, so that the neural pathways in our brain can actually grow and hold, right? Then we will literally become a new person, and that person is taking different action and thus getting different results. So it's very practical. There's no woo-woo about it. Now, having said all of that, the law of attraction is at work in all of that. In fact, it's working so much more efficiently because you're not looking at it, trying to figure it out. And deciding, well, why isn't it fast enough? Why isn't it? You don't need to know all of that. All you need to do is be that person and go through the process of rewiring. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem is that's really, really difficult because your whole life you've wired yourself the way you are, and mostly unconsciously. So now that's the truth. That's your truth. That is the lens through which you see the world. And if you want to experience a different truth, you have to change the lens. But that comes with the discomfort of new habits, new thought processes, new meaning, and getting rid of a lifetime of limiting stories, which is difficult because people identify with their stories. So they go, well, if I don't have my stories, then who am I? Let's decide. Let's figure that out. That's what this is about. Who do you want to be? And let's start being that and getting those results and really, truly change your life.
Mm-hmm. Shall we talk about being then? Because it all starts with being the person. And you spoke about transformation and the difficulties of transformation. And I'm going to go deeper into that in a moment. But let's concentrate for the moment on the be. So, for many people, myself included, the have and the do are very easy to determine. It's something tangible, it's easier to describe or to see. Be, because it is an inner state, it's not as easy. So when you say to be that person, can you explain that to me in more detail? How can you be first?
Well, first, we have to notice what's not working for us, like what parts of our being are disempowering or feel limiting. So that way we get to become an observer. And this is the first step I tell everybody, because the first essential skill of any of this transformation is knowing when you're on autopilot, when your wiring is kicking in and causing you to be or a way that's not going to get you where you want to go, or take or not take action, or make meaning that's disempowering or whatever. Learning to recognize that, being conscious of it, is the very first step. And I have tools that help people, determine sort of what is their likely propensity, what trait in their personality is going to actually show up and probably stop them from moving forward. But it's all about that awareness. So but that's the first step, is again, it's contrast. Well, I know I don't want to be this. I don't want to be a person who responds this way. What might it look like in an ideal situation? How would I like to respond in this situation? If I could respond in any way I wanted to, with confidence and bold, whatever it is, what would that be? And so this process, this is how we decide who we're going to be. And we can look to the world for inspiration, and we can look for traits in people that are doing things similar, or at least have some, bring you that you resonate with them and go, what is it that they're doing that I'm not doing that I could be doing? Sometimes it's things like just being more in integrity with your word, or having, more confidence, or exercising, or just, there's these little things that you can shift in your being. But first you got to notice what isn't working. But once you do that, then you have some choices.
Hi, it's Aggie here, interrupting you with something you may find useful. The most frustrating feeling is when you're trying to focus, but you can't get your brain to concentrate and zone in on the important work in front of you. And if it happens to you, you are not alone. 40% of people say they have to make a big effort to concentrate. But if you're having trouble getting focused, I have a solution for you. I'm so excited to be partnering with Brain FM. Brain FM is a great app, and I use it to block out my mental chatter and zone in on my number one priority of the day. Brain FM uses functional music, which is backed by science and research, and it is designed to give us that extra edge when we need our undivided attention. But they also have relaxation, meditation, and deep sleep modules that help you unwind and recharge. So if you want to be able to place your full attention exclusively in the activity you choose, whether that's meaningful work or relaxing or getting high quality sleep, right now, Personal Development Mastery Podcast listeners get 20% off Brain FM subscription at brain.fm/Aggie. That's an amazing deal for such a great app. Thousands of people have given 5-star reviews to Brain FM. Find out why. brain.fm/Aggie. You spoke about the autopilot, and that's it's a very fascinating concept. And my question to you, and I'm sure you hear that often, is the thing with the autopilot is that it takes over, hence the autopilot. So being able to detach from that, to take a step back and realize that I am on the autopilot, I think that is a step. It is obviously the most important step, because you become aware of the autopilot.
Yes.
But how can you step back from the autopilot to observe the autopilot? If my question is...
Yes. So you're training yourself to become aware. So it's literally a negative feeling or a disempowering emotion is a trigger for you to basically say to yourself, this is not the truth. This is just my wiring. Okay. So now knowing that is one thing, but as you said, it's difficult to just shift that sometimes, because there's a lot of biology that happens. When we make meaning out of a situation, we're flooded with all these hormones that give us this experience of emotion, and we're literally on our own drugs. And so it's even another layer of challenge to rise above that and still be conscious and go, wow, I'm on autopilot mentally, I'm on autopilot physically, right? But I see that it's just my wiring. Now, if you haven't already decided how you'd like to be different in that situation, then it can be really challenging. But part of my process is working with people is on a daily basis, you're going to sort of look ahead for things that you know are coming up. Obviously, there's going to be these surprises, but things that are coming up in your day where you think you might get triggered into an autopilot reaction, right? In a similar situation, you get too quiet, or you talk too much, or whatever it is. So you get to rehearse a different way of being ahead of time. This is the magic of our brain. See, we are definitely here to create our experience of reality. Our brain is it's all about imagination and visualization, giving us the ability to take action. I mean, we are here to create reality. There's no argument. We're built with these passions and these interests and this drive to grow and expand, just like the rest of the universe. The universe is ever expanding. We are a part of that universe. Therefore, if we don't expand, like if I'm in a dead-end job and we feel it, because we're going against our very, very nature. We're here to have these amazing experiences. So having a vision for yourself that inspires you, This is all important too. It can't be sort of lackluster. This desire to change has to be as important and non-negotiable as learning to walk or learning to talk or whatever it is that you know that this is non-negotiable. So you have to make your vision who you want to be and the results you're going to get and how happy, all the feelings that come with it. That's got to become non-negotiable. That will help you in those moments when you have the wire, because you know this person cannot have what the future person is going to have. And it is not negotiable. I must have that. So I have to let go of this and I have to choose something else, as difficult or tricky as it can be. Now, this is the reason that personal development has such a huge failure rate, because there can be great programs out there, and there are, but if a person doesn't stick with any one thing long enough for the wiring to take hold, of course, there's not going to be any permanent transformation. And to think otherwise is, again, that magical thinking. It's completely unrealistic. We're driven by the wiring in our brain. And if we don't change it, if we don't change the behavior long enough to make those neural pathways actually permanent, then of course, any old trigger is going to activate the decades of wiring we have, and we're going to be swept right back up. So again, the awareness is, it gets easier. It gets easier with time. You just notice, oh, I'm in upset. This is autopilot. And I've rehearsed a different way of being, and now I'm going to do it. And then at the end of the day, part of our process is going back over your day and going, okay, where could I have done better? How could I have been a little bit more congruent with the person I want to be and not so autopilot? And then you get to rehearse that and run that with all the feelings. And it's been proven time and time again that these mental rehearsals have physical effects. You hear about it in athletics all the time, people just rehearsing their move, their jump, their whatever it is over and over and over again in their mind. And they're growing neural pathways that will actually show themselves in the physical. So that the way that we're using our brain as a whole, humanity, is to worry about crap, right? Think about things, solve our problems. Yes. So we're not creating anything new and we're not growing. We're stuck on this, or we're ruminating about the past, or we're worried about the future. And that is, of course, going to determine the behavior we take, that we have, and in any of the action we take, and thus the results we get. But if we fill our minds with this vision of the future and empowerment and how we're being and how we're feeling and all of that, then our actions, the meaning we make out of things, is much more likely to be in alignment with that instead of our old way. And that's how our life changes.
Wow. Bob, this rehearsal that you mentioned, is it the same or is it different than visualization?
It's visualization. It is a visualization exercise. Yeah, absolutely. I'm asking people to visualize at the beginning and end of each day, basically their ideal selves in action, in situations where they know that they're normally challenged there, that these situations that they know are holding them back because they respond in a certain way, either physically out in the real world or emotionally, and it impacts the action they take towards results.
I get it. And what you said earlier, and I think that's very important, is that it is a training, that one shouldn't expect to visualize how the ideal reaction to an autopilot is and not go into autopilot, but it is a training, and I would expect it to become easier and eventually catch yourself before you go into the auto response.
Absolutely. And the nature of this is, and anyone listening can kind of check in with themselves on this and see if it isn't true. If in any way you doubt that you can change your being, I promise you, if you look back at yourself 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there were probably some key ways of being that have changed, some meaning that you make that's different. And you go, how did I ever even think that way? Or how could I have been a stand for that? Or how did I justify that behavior or whatever? Like, it's so completely foreign to you. You can't even imagine how you thought that way or were that way. But back then, when you were wired, it was the way. It was the most logical, obvious way, doing the best you can kind of way to be. This just shows you how rewiring can literally change the lens through which you see the world, and certainly who you are.
Mm-hmm. And there was something that you said that I want to ask you to expand more on, and that was that rewiring takes time, takes consistency. It's a process. So can you tell me a bit more about that? And if I can ask, even though it's a general question, when you say it takes time, What do you mean? How much time should one expect for a rewiring process to complete?
So there's so many different things that have impact the rewiring process, even down to your nutrition and the state of your body. Again, this is all a biological thing, so we have to keep that in mind. So, the length of time is also determined by how high the emotion is and how much you're going through all these filters. That's why I'm a huge proponent of breath work. Breath work, the way that, the practice that, I'm a part of, you get to this state where there's just no noise. You breathe, and now you're in this deep, deep meditation, and you're bypassing literally biologically all the stuff that stops you, that has you evaluate and go, oh, this could never happen for me or whatever. And you just get to reprogram. So there are definitely ways to speed the things up. If you have emotional, sort of release tools, for when you get that discomfort in these situations or old emotions come up, if you don't have a tool to kind of move through that more efficiently, it's going to take you longer. So again, so I have this whole framework called the Boundless Living Challenge, which is we have all the tools, we have all the daily stuff, we have all the processes, all of those things to make it more efficient. But again, one of the dangers we get into with this whole conversation and with the law of attraction is certainly applicable, is this comparison. Well, how come they manifested in a week? And I've been 4 years and I still don't have my dream house. This whole thing, it's like that's because they're taking different action. They're being different than you. Stop trying to figure out what's on their vision board that isn't on yours, or any of that stuff, or the universe doesn't want it for me because it's taking so long, and all of this nonsense. These are ideas that have just been thrown out there into the culture, into this idea. I mean, if you get on, I've had to remove myself from basically every law of attraction group on Facebook because it's maddening to see what people are saying and doing and asking and thinking and believing about it. They post all their inspirational quotes and everybody feels great, but you get the sense that no one's really attracting anything they want. They just love talking about the law of attraction. And and they're going to love it a lot more if they see it working. And they're going to love it a lot more if they see it working effortlessly, right? This obsession with it is I think, and that's just with anything. But again, the time, it took us a while to learn to walk. It took us a while to learn our language. It takes time to grow. It's a biological process. So you can't expect it to happen necessarily overnight, although there are some things that do cause instant rewiring. There are people who, attribute psychedelics and those types of experiences to rapid rewiring. A highly, highly traumatic or hugely emotional experience can bypass a lot of stuff too. So there is no way to answer how long will it take. You just have to expect that the process has to take, so that when the neural pathways are there, then it just is effortless. Just as effortless as you're being who you're being right now, it's effortless because you're wired that way. You don't have to think about it. You just are. Now we want to change who we're being. So yeah, we got to think about it, because the way most people go through is they just coast. They let the situations determine who they're going to be or who they need to be. They don't take a proactive role in who am I being. What they do is they say, how am I handling the situations as they come to me based on who I am right now? But if who I am right now, if you're not getting the results you want, then, you got to change who you're being a bit.
Absolutely. Do you want to tell me also about you mentioned it already, the discomfort that follows this transformation, and is that a sign of transformation then, if you feel that discomfort?
Well, I do feel like it, generally speaking, it means that you're up against your current wiring. So yes, it's the growth time. Mm-hmm. When you get to that discomfort, okay, now I've reached the limits of what's just easy and natural and effortless for me. So now I have to imagine something bigger, and it's going to trigger all the old stuff. So that's why, the discomfort comes up, because as soon as you start to grow, your wiring is going, no, that's not who you are. You're this, remember, and then shows you decades of evidence. But when you can realize that is a program, and it is not universally true for everybody. The guy down the street has a different lens they look through, and so does this person, and so does this person. So there's no one big truth. Everybody has their own. And if yours isn't serving you, you get to change it, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, and you're built to do it.
Mm-hmm. Is this related? I read somewhere you mentioned the term energetic comfort zone. Is that related to the energetic?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's just a way that I would would, if for the law of attraction, people who really love to think in terms of energy, you know, it's just like, it's one way or the other. It's still a comfort zone. So this energy of expansion or energy of abundance or whatever, once you reach that, you've got a certain amount of it based on who you're being. And once you, again, it starts here though, with the limits of the wiring, and then it broadcasts out, it turns into, you know, this energy or whatever of the limiting thought.
Awesome. Let me ask you something slightly different as well. You mentioned about self-talk. That is probably the biggest hindrance in our personal development or not achieving what we want to achieve. So I want you to tell me a bit more about the self-talk and especially the subtleties of it, because again, the self-talk is similar to the autopilot, isn't it? It doesn't,
yes.
We're not necessarily are aware of it. It happens
completely unconsciously and automatically, and it's all driven by your wiring. So, but again, that's just another thing that you want to be on the lookout for, is any of the self-talk that makes you feel less than or disempowered or whatever. So really the only trigger is, I'm feeling bad. I don't feel good right now. So what's going on? You know, if you can just look at why do I feel this way? Sometimes you won't be able to think about it in the moment, but it's something you can look at later, like what triggered me? And sometimes it is just this ridiculously complex web of events and things people said, and all the way back to childhood, right? And it all happens in a moment. But again, you can spend forever thinking about that, or you can just go, yeah, that's some crazy wiring. Now I'm going to stop going there and I'm going to go somewhere else, because we tend to dwell. We get into we have our wired response, and then we just settle into that and go, oh yeah, I can't, and I won't, and I shouldn't, and they said, and right. And we just ruminate in it. And some people do it worse than others. And then worst case, if you're studying law of attraction and you've got this fear of a negative thought, you know, then you go, oh, I should know better than this. And now you start beating yourself up just because you responded to your autopilot wiring. It's the most natural thing in the world for you to go back down that old road. It's the most natural thing. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just, are you committed to changing that? Yes, great. So let's pre-visualize how you want to be in this. What's the emotion? How do you really want to feel? What does that look like? And let's just start trying that on. Let's start rehearsing that. Let's go through the discomfort that comes with the growth, and we acknowledge all the noises, and we use our release techniques that we have for when that comes up, so we can glide through those and not get so stuck. So it really is one of these, there's 8 billion people on the planet for a reason. We are here to support one another. And this whole idea that becoming who we need to be and getting the things we want in our life has to be a one-man show or a one-woman, it's ridiculous. And it causes problems, because once you reach the limits of your resources, if you don't go outside, if you don't get coaching, if you don't get support, if you're not, you know, if you don't take on the tools or whatever, it's going to be a freaking long road if you ever get it traveled at all. Because depending on how loud that wired voice is, the ego or whatever you want to call it, it's going to make sense. It's always going to sound from where you're being logical and rational. One day it won't, but right now it does. It seems reasonable. You're right. I can't do that. I don't have the time. I don't have the resources. I don't know enough people. There's a blah, blah, blah. And I tried and I failed. And so I guess that's it. Right. That's all autopilot nonsense. And if everybody thought that way, if that was the way that we should gauge whether it was difficult or whether we made mistakes, we'd have nothing. We'd have no cameras. We'd have no phones. We'd have nothing. It's just like but it's a mindset. The general public, especially if they're in the personal development conversation, and especially if they've been in it forever and they're still not there. You know what I mean? It's like personal development. Yes, ongoing, but the study of it and the obsession with it, that's not what it's for. This is, we're here, hopefully, to say, to wake you up, because it doesn't matter whether you're using the law of attraction to get personally transformed and attract the things you want, whether it's hypnosis or any other program or strategy or approach. If you get the results, it is because your brain has changed. You have rewired yourself to be and think and do and make meaning differently than you did before. So whatever process, if it's Vision Boards that does it, awesome. If it's a Tony Robbins event, awesome. But it's not going to take unless you keep the messages going consistently and stop having, and you have to let go of those old stories. I promise you that some people, the most well-intentioned people who can spout off all kinds of personal development stuff, but they're still stuck to their stories about why they can't have this or oh, woe is me because of. And if you're not willing to let go of those old stories, then you're not willing to become, because that new person isn't going to tell those stories, because that person realizes that if you tell those stories, you're never going to get the results you want. You're going to push away everything that's going to get them for you. So you have to be willing to let go of the old stories. And it's mostly the emotional attachment. It's not like you're going to forget that these things happened, but they don't have to have domination over you.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. So let's say that someone listening to it now is convinced and committed to start this transformation process of rewiring. I will mention some of the things that I got from what you said so far, and please add anything you feel it's important to, take the initial steps in this transformation. So one thing I remember clearly was what you said about rehearsal or visualizing. You said letting go of the old stories, and you also said in the beginning the input that you get, which I suppose you mean personal development books or whatever else input, empowering input. Are these, that's just what I got from what you said, but for someone who wants to take the steps to the transformation and rewiring.
Yeah. So first of all, you have to be really present with your discomfort with what is. Because again, this just a half-assed approach to profound transformation is likely to be unsuccessful because of your wiring. You'll just be more easily moved into the other. If it's not super inspiring, then when it gets tough or when it gets uncomfortable, you will rationalize not doing it. And that's just it. So that visualizing piece of how great it is going to be when you are out there getting those results, when you're able to navigate this or that situation with grace, flow, and ease and empowerment with a quiet confidence or whatever, how awesome is that going to be? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And how are people responding? You get to imagine all of this, you get to pre-create all of this, but the critical step though, is at some point you have to go from recognizing that you're in autopilot to making the different choice. So the more you rehearse and things like that, the more likely you are to do it.
I see. Out of these actionable steps that you've mentioned already, if you were to give to the listener something that you think it's more important, or the first maybe step to take, which one would you choose?
It's the noticing your autopilot response. Because even the more you do it, like at first you can say, the first time you notice it, you can just say, yep, that's me in autopilot. And you'll probably just go do whatever, you were going to do anyway. But the more you catch yourself and the more you realize and tell yourself this is just wiring, it's going to become some of the emotional connection, the depth of the negative emotional responses in that situation will die off, because you're reinforcing over and over that this isn't truth. I don't need to be upset about this. My wiring wants to be upset about this, but I'm not going to go there. And the more that you notice, the more that you're able to be a little bit more, detached from the emotion of it, because you're seeing that, wow, I'm basically just kind of a robot here until I make a conscious choice to be something that overrides this autopilot. Because if you think about the whole concept of free will, it's dicey because we are on autopilot for the most part. Our brain is, even when we think we're making a decision that's free will, what's driving that decision? Why are we making that decision? What series of events happened that made us come to that decision that this is what we want or whatever? And sometimes the decisions that we make, the things that we say that we want, aren't really like as empowering or awesome as they could be. They're just driven by our autopilot wiring. Do you understand what I'm saying? So there's like so many actions and things that we do in our lives that we feel like we're just making a free choice, but we're not really. It's like, given our wiring, this is the only thing we could do. Now, to get true will, that starts with that awareness. And you go, wait a minute, this behavior I'm going to take, I'm being robotic right now. This isn't conscious really. It's unconscious. It feels conscious, but it's not. It's based on this autopilot stuff. When you can override that and supersede that will, that free will that's based on whatever, with what you truly want, like what this future person would want, now you've got true will. And that's where the magic really happens. That's when you really come to your life and start to design it, rather than just sort of coasting through it based on what comes at you.
That's absolutely a fascinating topic, the free will and how we make our decisions and whether we actually make, how we make the decision.
You can go deep on that
one. Absolutely. And I wanted to share a bit of my experience with what you were saying about the autopilot, because I think I am improving personally, catching myself early now. And sometimes that I've done it, I started laughing because I realized that a program has activated and I'm starting going down a behavior, a pattern of behavior, which only leads to bad situations. And I got it like maybe 5 seconds after it had started, and I stopped. And actually, I was with my partner and we joked about it because I saw the autopilot and I stopped it. So it's fantastic when it happens because you have more really opportunities to be who you want to be rather than the robot, as you say.
Because when people can go down such dark roads on autopilot and stay there for days or weeks or years.
Yeah.
And they don't have to. It's just a decision. But the decision feels so counterintuitive to their current wiring that they just can't bring themselves to do it. But that's why you got to have support. You got to have a different set of eyes. You got to have somebody who can see what you can't see. It's imperative because, again, you're looking at the world through your lens. You can't help it but see it the way that it is, that you're programmed to see it. But knowing that there is another way is key. That way you can accept input from the outside and reframe from the outside. Because if you go, this is the truth, you're just going to reject everything that comes to you in the way of, oh yeah, that'd be great, but this is the way it is. Right. But again, you have to be willing to understand how autopilot wired you are and be willing to accept coaching or feedback or, a bigger picture in there, even though your wiring is going to resist it. So again, transformation is a big deal. We're talking about changing yourself intentionally. See, we transform throughout our lives on autopilot and we're not, without even thinking about it. That's a person who's not even in personal development. We're changing our whole lives. What we're about is waking up and going, no, I want rapid change. I want efficient. I don't want another 40 years to go before I change who I am. If my brain is plastic and I can change it, let's get into it. Let's start it. Let's start this process now. And I'm willing to go through the discomfort. I'm willing to go through the feedback that may feel like failure. I'm willing to listen to my friends and family tell me that I'm crazy or whatever, because the vision I have is so non-negotiably strong and inspiring to me that it doesn't matter what these people say. When you elevate your vision, when you elevate who you're being, there's no guarantee that people around you are going to be on board. In fact, they're probably going to resist. Everybody there is there appropriately based on who you've been being. You start being something else, hey, all bets are off. If we allow ourselves to be guided by their input, their opinions, that's all them. And that's what people need to understand. Even if they're talking about you, that's them. That's their interpretation about you based on their wiring, their experience, their limiting beliefs, and the whole thing. So you got to be very careful about input from the outside if it does not empower you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that answer. And Bob, if let me ask you a couple of hypothetical questions as well. If you were to go back and meet your 18-year-old self, what's one piece of advice you would give him?
Choose wisely. That's like my biggest thing. Choose wisely. We make choices our whole lives that impact the rest of it. And here's the thing about telling an 18-year-old something like that. I mean, that's the thing. They're not that I signaled going in one ear and out the other, because they know everything, right? They know everything. And what you have to say is ridiculously irrelevant to them. So even if I showed up in front of me and said, no, seriously, choose wisely. But again, it endangers what happened, right? If I went back in time and told my former self, to choose wisely, and I made all these different decisions, we probably wouldn't be sitting here today, and so it's just one of those things. I think one piece of advice, but again, I think it shapes where I am today, is like, so much suffering is optional. Like things are just how they are. And so many times they're just going to turn out how they're going to turn out, whether or not you suffered over it, worried about it, got scared about it, got angry about it, like all this negative emotion that translates into suffering about things that they don't have any control over anyway. So I think, I know I suffered a lot in my life unnecessarily because I didn't know I didn't have to, right? It's just, again, you just learn. This is the thing. We as individuals learn differently about appropriate emotional responses, like how long to be angry at somebody, how long to hold a grudge. Do you forgive somebody for this or do you never? All of these things, but they're still just learned.
Sure. And let's say you could wave a magic wand and change something in the world as it is today. What would you change?
I would like for people to really understand that there is no one truth. Like if people could be more compassionate and understand that the reason that people are how they are is because for the most part, they were unconsciously wired that way, and have some compassion. You don't have to agree with them or any of that, but just to understand that everybody's really kind of doing the best they can, even if they're a real freaking jerk, because something led them down the path of being that way, being angry, being bitter, being mean, being whatever, but if you can understand that our truth is strictly that, our truth. If I could just wave that wand where people could see that, I think that would be the beginning of some pretty massive change.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. How can people connect with you? Where would you direct them to find out more about you?
So there's lots of ways. I mean, as you discovered, I'm pretty easy to find out there. But one of the things in relation to our conversation here and change, I think that a lot of people have problems. That first step is recognizing their own autopilot responses, because it all just feels like truth. So one of the things that I have done as part of this new work is to create this transformation personality type quiz. And now these types aren't your regular ones. I made them up, and I'm very open about that. But it's based on behavioral traits that I've seen in people that stop them from finishing the rewiring process. So the quiz itself is free, and it takes like 60 seconds. But if you take the quiz, you will understand what transformation personality type you are. And what it will show you is the behaviors that are probably in you that are stopping you. The things that show up in your life that when you are on the quest for transformation are generally the things that probably stop you or rationalize, non-completion. Becoming aware of that ahead of time, again, that's just like it's a hack. Now it's easier for you to recognize, oh yeah, I'm a people pleaser type, and I'm doing it right now with this person. I am sacrificing myself or what I want or what I think is important for the comfort of this person. But sometimes if you don't know that this is just sort of your propensity, if this isn't your type, then, you're just seeing this is the truth. So if they go to tptquiz.com for transformation personality type, tptquiz.com, like I said, it's free, 60 seconds, but it will give you some valuable information and specific things to do as that particular type that are, likely to help you in that recognition and making different choices when the time comes.
As a mini testimony to that test, because I took it and I realized that I was labeled the seeker, and I realized that yes, it is that person that doesn't hold the traction long enough, and something more interesting or promising gets the attention. So it is
the seeker type is by far the number one. The seeker type is far and beyond the other types, but there's a lot of people pleasers out there too.
That's great. Bob, I want to thank you very much for your time and sharing your expertise and your wisdom with me today. I want to wish you all the very best and keep on impacting the world with your work. Any last parting words?
No, I appreciate the conversation and the chance to share this with your audience. And I just invite everybody to just today, take on noticing when you go into autopilot. And for extra points, see if you can choose a different behavior that's more in alignment with the person that you truly want to be.
I hope you enjoyed listening. If you have, please share this episode with someone who you think will benefit from it. If you want to know more about what I do, visit my website 𝘁repetidas.com. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in,